it kind of has this trickle-on effect to all the other areas in my life, because that's where you find engagement and flow. When you live in line with those values, if you express them, that's where you start creating beautiful and meaningful relationships.
Well, another very happy 2022 to all my listeners. And I'm so excited today to be sharing with you the insight from Dr. Maike Neuhaus. 2022 is going to be spectacular just because we're starting off this year with such a great interview with such a phenomenal person. I've been following Dr. Maike for a while now. She is a leadership coach. She is a self-described expert in human flourishing and behavior change. And when I say she's a leadership coach, she coaches people on self-leadership to be able to find happiness and the life of their dreams through science-based studies, science-based experience, science-based leadership. She also runs this incredible course called the Fresh Start course, which I highly recommend you checking out. She's an author, an academic researcher, and a lecturer, and as I mentioned, a one-on-one coach of flourishing and a flourishing expert. In this episode, we talk all about what her definition of flourishing is and how she came to be an expert in happiness and in guiding her clients to feel fully fulfilled in their lives, and what she thinks is the most important part of finding happiness. What are the most important steps to take? Well, that's what you're going to find out in this interview. I hope you enjoy this phenomenal human being. This episode just made my day. So join me in welcoming Dr. Maike Neuhaus. Hello and welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy, and we have with us a very special guest that I'm so excited to introduce you to, Dr. Maike Neuhaus. Welcome. Welcome to the Business of Happiness.
Thank you so much, Tarryn. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I have been following you for quite some time on Instagram and just blown away by all the support that you offer to any of your followers on Instagram and on your website. And, you know, you are an expert, a self-proclaimed expert in human flourishing and on making your dreams come true and really supporting people with putting those tactics and skills in place to feel their very best and to see their dreams come true. What brought you to this? How did you become an expert in human flourishing?
Yeah, thank you so very much. And that's a very good question, because I think for many of us, the journey always starts many years back. I mean, at the moment, right now, I am a lecturer in positive psychology here at a top 50 university. So positive psychology is really the science behind what humans need in order to flourish and feel that fulfilling, thriving life. But I suppose my own journey really started as a kid. And isn't it funny? Because I think when we look back, many of us will be able to spot those very early patterns already. And for me, I know very clearly that even as a young kid, I was always hugely fascinated by the fact that some people thrive while others seem to get in their own way and bang their head against the wall and then complain about the wall. And it's always struck me as phenomenal. And I always wondered, what is it that separates the two? How come some people are able to, find that agency in their own life and create that life of their dreams and achieve their goals, and others kind of struggle more along the way? And I suppose from a young age, I had an inkling that a lot of that came down to our own mindset and practices and behaviors and so forth. So I started studying psychology after I finished school because I was interested in motivation and drive and all that. And it's interesting because back then, there was no positive psychology. It's sort of that science or subdiscipline of psychology is relatively young. Well, it's 40 years old now, but anyone who's ever worked in science knows that 40 years is nothing. Research takes a very long time. So it wasn't something that was offered back then at my uni, and it still isn't offered at most unis in the world. So I specialized in the only sort of subjects that applied psychology in a positive way. So you know that maybe traditionally psychology focuses on what's wrong with people, or clinical psychology focuses on helping people eliminate mental illness. And it's a bit like looking at it like, how do you get someone from -10 to 0? Now, positive psychology looks at how can you get someone from 0 to 10. And I love that. So the only subjects where this was kind of offered in that way was health psychology and also organizational psychology. So I specialized in the two and worked in the field, and then worked in health psychology research for a while, where we kind of helped a lot of people adopt a healthier lifestyle using the best practices from what we know about human behavior change. So that's where a lot of that behavior change sort of comes from, an interest in mine. And it wasn't until later on that I realized something is wrong. I wasn't feeling fulfilled in my career, even though I had a great academic research career and great positions and a great team and great supervisors and everything. But something was missing and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I felt like probably all those other people, that I'd observed when I was a child, that, couldn't find their own way into flourishing. And one day I'd had enough, and I sat down with a pen and paper and I started writing down anything that had ever fascinated me so much about psychology and human behavior change. And I wrote it all down, and I looked at it and I thought, this is a fantastic course. This is a fantastic workshop. And this is exactly what I want to be teaching and helping other people with for the rest of my life. So I started teaching it locally as workshops, and then created my website and my Instagram profile that you mentioned before. And now Fresh Start is basically that same course as an online course, and I combine it with coaching. So I really take everything I know from psychology and human behavior change. I did my doctorate specializing in sort of behavior change science. Positive psychology, I did a positive psychology practitioner certificate at some stage. And as I said, I'm now a lecturer in the field, but also self-leadership. There's a whole nother discipline that we probably need to talk about, that is self-leadership. And this is nowhere near the psychology literature and world, but it's hugely fascinating. And that is exactly what gives you an individual guiding framework you can follow to identify and accomplish goals that are truly meaningful to you and help you accomplish and achieve and create that meaningful and beautiful, happy life that, let's be honest, everyone is hoping to create, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I love looking at it as leadership of yourself. I love looking at that as an empowerment that we all have within ourselves. And it's just a matter of tapping into it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more, because at the end of the day, everything starts with our own, mindset and our own actions and our own clarity, our self-knowledge. Who are we and where are we hoping to go in this life? I mean, I don't want to get too philosophical or religious now in terms of our views here, but at the end of the day, if we assume we only have this one life, which is a huge gift, well, what do you want to do with it? What's most important to you? What are your values? And how can you live aligned to that? It seems like such a simple question, but it can be and feel really hard. I know this from my personal experience. But once you've nailed that, it's the most rewarding and liberating thing you can do. And it's where the key lies to finding purpose in life and meaning.
So tell us your story then. How did you struggle with that, first of all? And then how did you tap into that for yourself? Now, I know you have all this incredible education and you sought out the education, you sought out the holes, the gaps in your education to find what was fulfilling for you. But how did you put that all together to support yourself personally and then to reach that new place?
I love your questions. And it's such an important question, because even though I had all this knowledge about how you can change your own behaviors and how you can build new habits, this was what I specialized in. I realized all our theories and also practices and strategies that we'd identified and that science has identified about human behavior change, a lot of them lacked this one thing. And that is self-knowledge. And in particular, and we know this from research, in particular, it's understanding your own values and also your strengths. There are a couple of other things that might be important, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to your values and then also knowing your strengths. Because I realized even if you know the world and everything about human behavior change, that's fantastic to accomplish goals. But if you want to be able to identify meaningful goals that are going to make you happy in the first place, you have to understand your values. You have to understand who you are. So, and then I also realized, so this is something, the whole sort of self-knowledge component is something that I realized that's completely missing. And this is where we can tap into meaning. But the other thing I realized was that, and this is where positive psychology holds the key, is that we as humans are very good at sort of explaining how happy we are in any given moment in time. So if you ask me right now on a scale from 1 to 10 how happy I am, and I give you an 8, then chances are I'm probably actually sort of happy at an 8 out of 10. This might sound a bit weird, but we're not so good at sort of determining that or evaluating that from many other things in our lives. But what research shows is that we are very bad at predicting what we think will make us happy in the future. So what we actually need in order to be happy. And this is a phenomenon called miswanting, and it's quite well researched. So the thing is, we often think that materialistic things will bring us happiness, the bigger house, the white picket fence, the flash car. Sometimes it's even things like we think if only we were married or had kids, we'd be so much happier. And research shows that that is not the case. So again, we come back to how can we identify meaningful goals, and also goals that will actually then deliver on their happiness promise, because we all can accomplish goals, but will they actually make us happy when we get there? We have to understand what humans need in order to be happy. And then we can build our goals around that. And once we do that, we can build that beautiful, fulfilling life that we all want. So that's kind of where I put this all together. But then also there was something missing, and that was that individual guiding framework. So where do you start? And in what order sort of can you do all of this? What do you have to do right now? Where do I start? And what's the next step? And then what's the next step? And so that's where self-leadership offered some guidance. And so what I did and what I created with the Fresh Start program is all of the above combined in the one thing. Everything about what we need to know about happiness. It starts with self-knowledge, so the guiding framework of self-leadership, and then all the knowledge and tools from human behavior change to make our goals a reality. So that's sort of what my Fresh Start program is about.
So when you were doing this for yourself, Maike, how did you find any values within yourself that surprised you? Was there something that you looked at in yourself and you thought, wow, I never knew that about myself. I never realized how important that was to me?
Yeah, love your question again. Absolutely. And I think this is where it can be tricky with identifying our values, because I struggled with this for a very long time. When you have no idea about what's most important to you in your life, and you do some exercises around identifying your values, most of the time where you start is someone hands you a values sheet with lots of values listed, and I can see you nodding that you've been there before and you've done this. And you look at this sheet of values, and so these are just some random words, right? Like freedom, love, safety, compassion, whatever it may be. And of course, there is no finite list of values. So this is to give you some examples and to get you started brainstorming what might be your core values. Now, I used to look at those lists and go, of course, safety is important to me. Of course, freedom is important to me. Of course, compassion is important. And I went tick, 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 tick. And before I knew it, I had about 300 core values. And this doesn't help anyone. So the trick is really to go, well, what are really your core desired feelings? What are the things that make you jump out of a chair? And I think we have so many filters and limiting beliefs that hold us back from really identifying those, because we judge everything we do and think and say.
Yep.
So when I looked at how can I possibly not tick the compassion box, and my husband will laugh now. It's become this running joke in our family. And at the end of the day, you have to find those things that make you jump out of your chair. Because the thing is, when you find your core values, it doesn't matter whether you think they are good or bad, as in the labels we may put upon them as a society. When you've identified your core values, no matter what they are, once you start tapping into them and living by them, you will be of the greatest service to society and the people around you that you could possibly be. And so to get back to your question, I realized after doing many exercises and tying my brain into knots that adventure was a massive core value to me. And adventure obviously is like, what's the societal value of adventure? Probably not much. And it's this whole idea of, oh, so selfish, and it's just a feel-good thing. But for me, it means so many different things. And I think that's also where it comes down to the importance of, once you've identified your values, to sit down and write down what they actually mean for you in detail. So for me, they are things like traveling, for sure, but trying out new experiences, starting my own business. And through my business, I've helped so many people, meeting new people, reaching out to different people. And I'm so grateful we were able to connect. So it can mean a whole lot of different things, and it'll mean something else to everybody else. But certainly adventure was a big eye-opener to me. And the most beautiful thing is, once you've identified it, you just have to ask yourself, how can you invite more adventure, or whatever your core value may be, into your life? And then your life just becomes fabulous.
Oh, that's beautiful. I also see so much power in identifying something like adventure to be able to address challenges. Anytime you see a failure or a struggle, you can look at that as an adventure as well. Just being able to know how to frame your mindset around something that really connects to you on a deeper level allows you to see yourself through some of those bigger challenges in your life as well, but knowing when it really matters to you, and not a value system that actually belonged to someone else that you just attached to.
I love that you said that, because that is so true. And it almost touches on the idea of using strengths as well. Because the truth is, when we identify our own values and we manage to live more in line with our values, it means we become kind of skilled at them. So in that moment, it becomes a strength of ours. And research shows so clearly that when we can use our strengths to accomplish goals and to bring to challenges, not only will it be actually quite rewarding for us to do so, we will be so much better at accomplishing those goals. We will feel happier when we're done. There are so many benefits to bringing our strengths to whatever we may try to achieve, or whatever challenges we might try to tackle. So absolutely. And I think this is a very beautiful notion, because that's where values can actually become strengths as well.
Yeah, and there's something there about motivation as well. We're living in a culture where everyone's looking for, how do I stay motivated? What is the motivation for me to get what I want? And something in there about identifying your values and your strengths can lead us to a better understanding of motivation, self-motivation.
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. That's so true. And motivation, as you said, is one of those, well, not buzzwords, but everyone needs it. Everyone wants it, right? Well, we can argue about that. But what we know, again, from research is that motivation is a very complex thing. And it's funny that we use that one word to describe many different things. I mean, most people are aware of the fact that we have intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation, when we do things because we perceive joy as we're doing them, we actually enjoy doing those things. But what we really want, right, is to be able to find motivation for the things we don't like doing, like exercising regularly, or being more tidy around the house, or getting more work done, especially those work tasks that we don't enjoy, right? And there are actually several different types of extrinsic motivation. And one of them is very similar to what we call intrinsic motivation. It's very similar to it, even though we don't naturally enjoy this activity, maybe. But through using certain strategies, we can tweak our extrinsic motivation in a way that we will almost want to pursue the activity, and aligning the activity with our values and using our strengths in order to do so, as you just mentioned, are key to that.
That's so cool. Okay, give me an example of that. So give me an example of an extrinsic motivator that would be tied to that intrinsic, those values and strengths.
Yeah. So my favorite example that probably everyone can relate to is brushing teeth. Now, this can also be a bit of a tricky example because most of us have been brushing our teeth regularly from a very young age. So it's probably hard to almost think back to a time where it was introduced into our lives in the first place. But brushing our teeth is something that you could say, well, almost everybody does it, but surely not everybody enjoys it intrinsically, right? That would be kind of weird. Now, the thing is that to most people, having healthy teeth or clean teeth or a beautiful smile are things that are important to them. So this is, health and sort of well-being, maybe also attractiveness, whatever it may be, is something that is important to most people. And so it aligns with their self-concept, but it aligns with their values as well. So these become things that then we do them twice a day without even questioning them. So of course, this is because we then have built habits around it. So this is another story. But the fact that we have built those habits around it in the first place is because it's something that was important to us in the first place. You could name other examples like making your bed in the morning. Well, why do you do it? You enjoy the activity so much of making a bed. Do you know what I mean? And no offense to people who don't make their beds in the morning.
No judgment there.
Exactly.
No,
Does that make sense?
it does. That makes a lot of sense. And I think you also incorporated the habit pattern that then is the promise that one day this will get easier. So as you're
Absolutely.
trying to get that new habit pattern, started, it's uncomfortable. But once you do, now, as you mentioned, we don't even think about it. It's just a part of our routine.
Absolutely. And spoiler alert, it's not 21 days. It doesn't happen in 21 days, as many people like to believe, because that's the information you probably find in the first place when you Google new habits.
Yeah, I know. I was just listening to a podcast recently about how someone just came up with that number and it just took off on the internet. Now we all believe the 21-day concept
I know,
of
it actually
habit stuck.
Exactly. I think you can track it back to a paper that was published on something somewhere, I think to do with water intake, but it's like not very well conducted research, and you can't just generalize it. But this is the problem we're facing these days with widely available information and our inability to evaluate it critically ourselves, I think.
If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you didn't get into business to be miserable. The problem is that people feel that if their business gets busier, if they start becoming more successful, that happiness will eventually set in. But it can actually get worse. This is why I created the Business of Happiness Prosperity Coaching. In this one-on-one coaching, we look at how to redefine success on your terms and re-find the joy and the passion in your dream. Visit me at thebizofhappiness.com and become the happiest business owner you know. You know, that actually brings up a really great point. We're living in really unprecedented times about questioning science and rumor mills and the science on Facebook, the pseudoscience on the internet, and not really being able to distinguish truth from fiction. And I wonder if you have any perspective in terms of when we get lost in that and really what is the truth, and when we find ourselves struggling in that place, because that can really impact people's happiness and flourishing, especially when it triggers fear. And so how do you address that with your clients in terms of not knowing where to go for the truth, or how do you establish what the truth is for yourself?
That's a very deep question, because it's actually a philosophical question, right? What is the truth? Is there such thing as an objective, ultimate truth? So this is almost like where we need to talk about what's reality. But we can't do that because I'm not capable of going there, and we won't have enough time for this. So as a scientist, I very much do believe that there is such a thing as a reality, one reality, and an objective truth. In fact, obviously, this is the ambition of science, to get as close to an objective truth as we possibly can. So I do believe in science. I don't know when on earth science has become a matter of opinion or something you believe in or not. It strikes me as very bizarre, but I know that I'm biased, of course, as a scientist. But throughout the pandemic, it seems like people have started questioning the whole truthfulness of science, which it's mind baffling for me. So for me, when I try to find something that's evidence-based and truthful and objective and not biased with personal opinion, I look to science. Now, I know that not everyone has access to scientific papers. Not everyone is able to read those papers. I'm not able either. You need to really be almost like an expert in your field, and then you can read those papers in your field and understand them. But go slightly outside of your field, it becomes impossible, because you have to be able to put everything into context. But if you can't access or read scientific papers to a particular topic, usually, and I got to say everything with a bit of a disclaimer, but usually government material is science-based. In Australia, I know that maybe in other countries there are corrupt governments and so forth, so I can't really comment on that. I know that in Australia, the government works evidence-based, and they collaborate with researchers to always put out the best guidelines. In fact, as a researcher, I have collaborated with government to suggest the most beneficial way forward with certain health behaviors. But so government websites are usually good. Certain websites that are specializing in a certain discipline. Again, I would always look at what are the qualifications of the people who put the information out there, and not just go with someone says. It's very difficult these days, because we do have those social media algorithms, and they feed us the information we already want to hear. So we as humans have something called a confirmation bias, and that means that we will automatically be more inclined to believe facts that already align with our already existing beliefs. And this is a really tricky one. And this is probably the biggest piece of advice I would give to anyone: questioning your own beliefs and being open to or of the information you're reading. Of course, I would never look to a platform like Facebook to find valuable information. Always look outside of it. So look at the quality of the source you're looking for information for. Look at the qualification of the people, and kind of question and be open. But I acknowledge it can be a very difficult task these days to understand what you can and shouldn't believe.
I love, and I apologize, it looks like our internet is a little bit unstable here, Maike, but we're going to keep going. And don't worry, I'll come back and edit out the pieces. What I wanted to say is, speaking about this very science-based outlook, I really love that you mentioned the research-based emphasis of how you coach your clients and looking at flourishing from a science research-based perspective, because I think one of the challenges that many men and women who are in science have is when they're feeling unhappy, when they have anxiety, depression, overwhelm, and they have so much evidence in their life to support inadequacies or fear or their limitations. Many of us science-based professionals in the health sciences and in the research sciences use our scientific skills to provide evidence for what is not possible for ourselves. And I love what you talked about in terms of challenging our own beliefs. So as a science-based person, how do you approach that with your clients when they say, but look, here's all the evidence for why this isn't possible for me, or all the evidence from my childhood. And when I had a therapist, they explained to me why I am the way I am and I cannot change. How do you help guide people in that regard?
That's a very good question. I think sometimes, so if I work with my clients one-on-one, I think that's probably the easiest way to actually help them with this. Sometimes all it takes is asking them one question. And as you know, as coaches, our main job is to listen very carefully and pick up when we hear our clients having those beliefs. You know, some people believe things like, but I wouldn't be able to do that. And you pick up, you hear those statements, and all it takes is, no, wouldn't you be able to do that? And why is that? And when you ask them those questions and mirror that belief to them, that is so skewed sometimes. They often have the epiphany in that moment where they go, actually, yeah, true. Why wouldn't I be able to do that? So I think often it's just our biggest problem is, and our biggest challenge is that we're so much in our own head. And all of these things that we constantly think and tell ourselves, we are often not even aware of them. And through coaching, the beautiful thing is you talk it out, and someone listens to it and paraphrases. It's like, okay, so do I understand you right, that you didn't even apply for this job because you thought you wouldn't stand a chance anyway?
Yep.
And someone will go, yes, actually, that's so true. You know, but we don't realize that when we don't have someone feed this back to us and ask those questions. So I think this is also very much aligned with the whole philosophy behind coaching, that people know what they need. People have their own solutions. It's just, unfortunately, they're hidden under all those thoughts and beliefs we carry. And this is the beauty about coaching, because coaching is not about telling someone what to do, but helping them uncover the solution they already have, helping them uncover the knowledge they already have. It's just hidden under all this crap we constantly tell ourselves.
And hence the self-leadership that you encourage.
Yeah. Absolutely, because self-leadership has three components. So we spoke about self-knowledge earlier. So this is the first component. The second component is self-goal setting. And this is where things like the whole idea about motivation becomes important, because the way we articulate our goals has a lot to do with how motivated we actually are, how likely we are to achieve our goal, and so forth. And the third component is self-regulation. And self-regulation is where you put your plan into practice and you make everything sort of become a reality. Now, that involves three things in and of itself: regulating your thoughts, regulating your emotions, and regulating your behavior. So this is sort of the context where we start addressing some of the limiting beliefs we have, some of the biases, and and how we can harness the goodness of our brain. Because I think as human beings, we always think we're so cognitive and we are so rational. We make such well thought decisions and so forth. And the reality, and I can see you not here, it's so cute, is far from it. Yeah. We're like half zombie, half human, or half animal, half human, or whatever you want to call it. We can talk about the autopilot if you want to, but
yes, please do. I mean, that's exactly where we're going, because I think you're right. So many of us believe we're so intellectual and so intelligent, and we lose sight of this autopilot that you're referring to. And that's colored by so many aspects. And I'll let you take it from here. So share with us that autopilot and the influences of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with it. I assume so, but autopilot sort of describes the phenomenon that often we complete actions and do behaviors without even thinking about it. So prime example is when you drive to work. So you jump into the car in the morning, you drive to work, you get to work and you go, I can't actually remember anything that happened on the drive. Did I actually drive here myself? And it's because we're so routined, not only in driving a car and what's involved with indicating or turning the lights on or whatever, switching gears, but also we're so routined in the route we have to take to work. We know exactly where to turn and so forth. So this would be an example of being on autopilot. Now, this is the opposite to being mindful, actually, being in the here and now and being absolutely present. What's the problem with autopilot? Well, in general, nothing at all, because the reality is that an autopilot is very important. Why? Because it serves as energy. And as humans, we've always been very focused on preserving energy. If we didn't have the autopilot, every time you jump into your car, you'd have to think anew how to actually drive the car and what do you have to do now, and how do you get to work. So it's important to have this. Where it becomes a problem is where we are running on autopilot and we use behaviors that we may have learned in the past because it served us then, but they're no longer beneficial to us now. So, for example, if we have a difficult argument with someone and we feel upset and stressed, and the first thing we do is we open the fridge and just grab something to eat. Let's just say, I don't know, because that's sort of the habit we have. We just eat it away. So, there are lots of situations where our behavior no longer serves us. It's done so in the past, but when we really think about it, there would be other behaviors that would be much more beneficial. So learning to detect when we're on autopilot, when it doesn't serve us, is obviously a very important tool. And we can do that through mindfulness practice and increasing our sort of self-monitoring routines, and then learning to pause before jumping into a reaction and instead actually choosing a response. So there's a big difference between reacting and responding. One, there's a choice, and the other, there isn't. So that's kind of how we can break out of that autopilot. It's not always easy. And the only way to really get out of that is to build new habits. And as we said earlier, building habits is also not easy. It requires a lot of concerted effort and energy that we put towards it, and energy we often are running short on to start. So it just becomes a very important aspect of self-regulation, I suppose.
Yeah. Something that I've wanted to ask you, because it's so fascinating speaking to you. I'm sitting here in Maine in the United States. I'm originally from South Africa. I know you're talking to us now from Australia, and you're originally from
Germany.
And so it's so fascinating to me. And I'd love to know from your perspective, are these tenets cross-cultural? Do they support people from any culture, from any continent? Because right now you and I have them almost all covered, just about. We're missing one or two in there, but between the two of us, we've been on almost every one. And so how do you see that translating in terms of cultural influences and cultural biases?
That's a very good question. So in terms of the autopilot in particular, that's just human. That's how we're wired. But it's a great question, because obviously science always tries to identify what is in a way it is because we're human, or what is in the way it is because we are female, or because we are Dutch, or because whatever it may be, right? So a lot of the research then aims eventually to, they run replication studies across other countries to see, do we find the same causalities or relationships between certain things in other countries as well. And when we talk about things like the autopilot, absolutely, we are human. And, that's something you will find in every culture. With regard to happiness, absolutely. And those studies have been replicated across most other countries. you'd really have to look at the individual aspects. So, for example, values is something that might slightly change. So, for example, we know that in the Eastern, more Asian countries, society puts stronger emphasis on certain values. So that's where we have a collectivist culture, right? The individual isn't so important. In fact, you really don't want to stand out. Whereas the Western world, is a lot more about, how can you stand out? It's celebrating the individuals. It's all about celebrities and those sorts of things. So we might place different emphasis on different values depending on which culture you're in. But you could argue, of course, this might be reflected in individual values, but you could argue that at the end of the day, we are sort of all individuals. So what I'm trying to say is that it really depends on the context and the specific aspect you're looking at. I can tell you with regard to human strengths and virtues, for example, the research that comes out of positive psychology to uncover, are there universal strengths and virtues for humans? That research was actually based on analyzing and studying texts from around the world.
One of the things that I ask all of my guests is their definition of happiness. And I'm going to take from you your terms that I believe Martin Seligman coined the term flourishing. So let's use that instead, because I think it does so beautifully encompass so much more than just the experience of happiness. So what is your definition of flourishing?
That's a very good question. And I love that you added or that you changed and rephrased your question into what is my definition of flourishing? For me personally, I would say it's the ability to live in line with your values. Simply because you're tapping into so many things. And of course, there's more to flourishing than just living in line with your values. In fact, it's one of the 5 components that Martin Seligman would speak about. You can look this up in something called the PERMA model. But for me, living in line with my values has been an absolute game changer. And I think it kind of has this trickle-on effect to all the other areas in my life, because that's where you find engagement and flow. When you live in line with those values, if you express them, that's where you start creating beautiful and meaningful relationships. It's where you can create beautiful moments for yourself of happiness, for that more sort of hedonistic type happiness, the feel-good happiness. So for me, it really covers up on everything else. So living in line with my values would be my definition of happiness or flourishing.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. And you touched upon this at one point in understanding happiness and flourishing in each of our lives and recognizing not only what our values are, but also our strengths. What for you is your superpower?
Oh, that is also a good question, and depends on which tool you're looking at. So obviously, I've done all the strength finder tools in the world.
I love it.
And it's so funny and it's so interesting. And I can honestly recommend it, because research shows that we are very quick to rattling down a whole list of weaknesses if we're asked about our weaknesses. And when someone asks you about your strengths, we have no idea. And here we're talking about cultural influences again too. But I think, well, if you ask me personally, I'd say self-leadership. And I'm just going to put it out there as a skill or as a strength. Absolutely. Because, and this is not surprising, right? Because when you look at the early years of my life, where I started to build this very strong fascination for self-leadership. This is what it comes down to, right? How come some people can create the life of their dreams and create this agency and become the authors of their own lives, and others struggle. So I've had this fascination for such a long time. And of course, it's why I went to uni. It's why I studied behavior change and human flourishing for so many years. And I would say also, when you look at where I come from and some of the challenges I've been able to overcome, I'm very proud of myself for having come this far. And I can honestly say that I'm, very proud of myself for the life that I've been able to create so far. I have still many dreams, but they're beautiful to have, I think, because that's what keeps you jumping out of bed in the morning and going for the next day and something to work towards. But self-leadership is definitely my key strength.
Can you share with us one of your dreams?
Yes, absolutely. Love talking about it. We're currently dreaming about sailing the world with our children.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're working towards hopefully being able to get a big sailing catamaran and packing everything up and sailing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that'd be miraculous. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love that.
Oh, Maike, this is so fun. This has been just a joy for me. So thank you for making my day, because just hearing your perspective and challenging you and being able to just talk about these concepts is just such a pleasure for me. So thank you for honoring me, and thank you for sharing your perspective and your insight with my guests, with my listeners as well, because I know so many people are going to find so many phenomenal nuggets in what you talked about today. I appreciate it. And I just want to say, I want to honor you and thank you for following your passion for self-leadership, and for not only challenging the education that was available to you and seeking out more, knowing your hunger for understanding it better and better, but then also following through to serve your community, to share that insight with all of us. So I honor you, and I'm so grateful to you for following that passion of yours.
Thank you so much, Tarryn. And honestly, it's been my honor to be here and talk to you. I love your energy. I love the messages you put out into this world. So thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'd be happy to do this every day.
I might take it down. Before I ask you my final question, how can my audience members find you online and learn more about your Fresh Start program and your one-on-one coaching?
Oh, thank you. That's so kind. And it's actually perfect timing, because I am currently finishing up the first round of the Fresh Start program, and I'm going to launch the next round in January. So probably January 23rd. So you can find me on drmaikeneuhaus.com, which I hope you can spell out somewhere, because my name is a nightmare to most people.
Absolutely.
So it's drmaikeneuhaus.com.
Yeah, we'll definitely offer the spelling there for everybody.
Thank you. As well as my Instagram. I'm mostly active on Instagram and Facebook, so you can find me there. I'm very happy to connect with people on LinkedIn as well. And on my website, you'll find some information about my online program, the Fresh Start program. There's currently a waiting list to get notified for the next opening in January. The easiest way is just to join my newsletter list. That way you'll get notified. You'll be one of the first ones to get notified. And I often send out discounts through my email list as well. And then if you want to take me up on coaching, you can find information about that on my website as well. And I offer free 30-minute self-leadership strategy coaching sessions as well. So for those of you who might feel stuck and who might be languishing, and you need help, but you just don't know where to start, this is what I created these free short chats for, just to give you a head start and give you a nudge in the right direction. So yes. That's it.
So my final question to you is, if my listeners are hearing all of this and they're thinking, yes, this is me, I need some better guidance, I need a new perspective, I would love to flourish, I feel so far from flourishing right now. What is one starting point, one small action that you can offer, a small suggestion of how to change perspective and change mindset to step into that possible realm of possibility and seeing flourishing in your life?
Yeah, probably not surprisingly, I would say understand exactly what your core values are, and then look at how you can live more aligned with them. How can you express them more? To some people, this is an exercise that comes easily. To others, it can be a real challenge, including myself, as I shared before. But yeah, sitting down, identifying your values. If you don't know what's most important to you, what can you possibly aim for in life?
Wonderful. Well, very happy 2022 to you. I can't wait to
see
what
you
comes
too.
this year for you. And please stay in touch. We'd love to hear more from you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tarryn, for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.